Chicago. Good morning. Welcome to Catholic Chicago on WNDZ, 750 AM, 312-255-8408. You can also get us on youtube.com/Catholic Chicago, youtube.com/Catholic Chicago. Father Greg Sakowicz, the rector of Holy Name Cathedral, and joined always co-host Mark Teresi, executive director of the cathedral. Good morning, Mark. How are you?
Good morning. Very good. Very good. Traffic's terrible all over Chicago.
Baseball starts today.
Yeah.
That's part of the traffic problem.
Yeah, your favorite team, don't they?
Right, in Houston.
Oh.
The White Sox. But you have the Cubs opening up today at home against the Milwaukee Brewers. And it looks like a pretty good day. It's supposed to be partly sunny, 53, which is not bad at the end of March. It could easily still be snowing or 35 degrees and sleet. So we got the Brewers at Wrigley Field, and the White Sox playing the world champ Houston Astros. They'll have their hands full. I think Houston took it. Clinton, did Houston take it last year? The Astros?
Yes.
Yeah, they did. Yeah,
Yeah, they
Astros.
did.
They won the World Series.
I even knew that.
Well, I'm surprised about that one. And 312-255-8408. A great program lined up here this morning. Since 2004. Catholic Men Chicago Southland, CMCS, has helped men to do what is in their power to do, namely be holy and courageous men to improve their marriages, be better fathers to their children, grow in virtue, serve the needs of others more generously, be active participants in their parishes, and be better citizens. The CMCS Annual Men's Forum is held on the Saturday after Easter Sunday, which this year is Saturday, April 15th. And by the way, Mark and Bishop Harry, 1 year from today is Holy Saturday, because a year from now, Easter is March 31st, very early next year.
Oh.
So, little tidbit there. Joining us in studio to talk about the Catholic Men Chicago Southland as annual men's forum is Bishop Joseph Perry, outstanding bishop of the Archdiocese of Chicago for years now, and auxiliary bishop in Vicariate 6. Also joining us via Zoom is Executive Director of the Catholic Men Chicago Southland, Frank Casella. Good morning to Bishop Perry and to Frank. Good morning, gentlemen. How are you?
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you.
Doing good. Morning, Father Greg. Good morning, Mark.
Good
Now,
morning.
Frank, you live where, Frank?
I live in Homewood, South Suburbs.
In Homewood, South Suburbs. But now you had previously, some years ago, you were a photographer for the Chicago Catholic or New
Yes,
World?
and I was mainly assigned to Cardinal Bernardine.
What years was that, Frank?
That was 1988 to 1996 when he died. And then when Cardinal George came in, he didn't want a photographer.
Oh,
So I moved on.
he didn't want a photographer. I think you've grown a mustache since I last saw you.
I've had this a long time. I don't know how long I've had it.
Maybe it's been a while. And Bishop Perry ordained in 1975 and elevated, consecrated a bishop in
98.
So
It was BC.
20
Before computers.
So 25. I like that. Before computers. I can remember that line. So 25 years a bishop, and you've done a phenomenal job. And I can't believe, I remember when I was at Holy Name Cathedral, and who was with you the day you were elevated a bishop? Was there anybody else in your
No, I was by myself.
by yourself? And who was right before you
That would have been John Mans.
Oh, okay.
and right after you?
Right after me, there would have been who?
Would that have
Is
been
that the Proprocki and
no? Would that have been Bishop George Rassis?
George Rassis.
Oh, Jerry
Sticky
Listecki?
Sticky, yeah.
Okay, how about Sports for 500?
Now, can I ask how does that? I bet listeners would be interested. How did you find out you were going to be a bishop, and what was your reaction?
I found out at 6:30 in the morning on April 28th. I was getting ready for my morning mass, and the telephone rang. I thought it was my mother calling me. She would usually call me in the
That
morning
early.
before the day got busy, but there was this foreign accent on the other side of the phone. And then I thought it was a salesman. I was rushing to open up the church for the holy women who come in and pray before Mass. But it was Archbishop Agostino Cacivillan, who was at that time the pronuncio to the United States. That's how it happened, early in the morning.
So which means you almost could have hung up thinking it was a salesman.
Prank call.
Sure.
Yeah.
A prank call.
Sure.
And said, I don't have time for this,
Yeah.
and hang up and run out and go open up the church.
Yes.
And now, when the call came, he's asking you to be named a bishop, and will you accept? And do you have to kind of accept
No,
on the
he's not
spot?
asking. He's not asking.
He's telling.
He says, he identified himself as the pronuncio, and he said, I've been charged with informing you that Pope John Paul II has named you auxiliary bishop to Cardinal Francis George. And I thought it was a classmate playing a joke, joke
Exactly.
on me. Yeah.
I've had more priests named bishops say that when the call came, they thought it was a prank from a
Yeah.
classmate, a friend,
Yeah.
Monsignor Ken Vilo, who could imitate Cardinal Bernardine very, very well. And it was coming from Ken. And also, it's not asking, it's more
It's
of
informing.
it's informing and saying, yes, Cardinal, and or yes, Archbishop, and that talk about being a game changer.
Yeah.
But
How did that
Changes your
change?
life.
Oh, I'm sorry. How did that change your? You were opening the church for the women
Yeah.
praying in your parish, and all of a sudden, now you're going to have huge responsibilities. Leave that parish probably. And how did that feel for you?
Oh,
Just-
it was the largest change of anyone's life. It turns your life inside out, upside down. Everything happens with rapidity thereafter, and you can't say anything to anyone until
for how long had you had to
it was
keep
about
it
10 days.
to keep it a secret? Amazing. So we'll get going with the program here because that's a
I
fascinating
know
thing.
that's
Frank, with this big Catholic Men's Chicago Southland CMSC, and you said it was formed back in 2004?
4.
And
Yes.
are you the founder?
I'm a co-founder, myself and Bishop Perry and the Deacon John Rangel.
Okay, now stepping back almost 20 years ago, how did this whole thing even come about? Did you approach Bishop Joe Perry? Did he approach you? How did this whole thing originate?
Well, I'm a fourth generation Knights of Columbus. I grew up in the Knights of Columbus. My father ran all the parties. And so I learned from my father how to organize and be an event planner. And then what happened is I got involved with Promise Keepers, and I met Deacon John Rangel through that. I was involved with several other men's movements and Christian Businessmen's Committee. There was another one here in Chicago that I was a co-director for, and that kind of went belly up because there was a bunch of businessmen that were bean counters. But short of the long, when that stopped, I saw the void. I saw the void in my own life about connecting with men, Catholic men. And so I talked to Deacon John, and we went to our vicar, and we asked him, what should we do? And he said, let's start a movement. And that's how it all started.
And then you approached Bishop Joe Perry?
Yes, he is our vicar in the diocese, in the vicariate. Now, because I work for the New World, I traveled the whole archdiocese. I realized how large the archdiocese is. So I asked him, can we just start it in the vicariate and see what happens? And what really has happened over the years is that we stayed in the vicariate and everybody comes to us.
Interesting. And then when Frank and the deacon came to you, Bishop Joe Perry, what was your immediate reaction?
I thought it was filling something of a void because we had a couple archdiocesan-wide men's conferences, And those kind of went into abeyance. They turned out to be rather expensive events. And we kind of filled a void, especially with bringing men who were in the south suburbs. A lot of events took place in the city, but not necessarily in the suburbs. And we wanted to connect with men who normally would be out of the loop with much of archdiocesan activity at that time. And connecting with parishes that had men's groups of varying descriptions. And we kind of kept the ball moving and rolling to this point.
And it's been 19 years later.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it says, for men to be holy, courageous, improve marriages, better fathers to their children. Now, if someone's listening, we may have to take a break first, but I would bet a lot of Catholic men want to connect to that. How do they do that, and what does the curriculum for that day look like? But I think we need to take a little break first.
We got a couple minutes. We can still keep going.
So how do men connect to this?
How do they connect in this, Frank?
It's a very interesting thing because most men that I talk with, first thing they say, and Deacon Coleman, who runs the Kias House, which is also a ministry of Bishop Perry, those men say the same thing. They all want to know, what is a Catholic man? And so Bishop Perry and I put together the Catholic man's prayer, and we also put together the virtues of a Catholic man. And so those are the things that answer what is a Catholic man. And what it comes down to is the fundamentals of the faith. There are men's ministries that are popping up all over the place like dandelions. But what it comes down to is we have to go to the foundation of our faith, which is the fundamentals. And that is the sacraments, the Ten Commandments, the magisterial teachings of the Church, and the Catechism. And then what also that leads to is how the Church and the Catechism call us to be the domestic church. The Catholic household is the domestic church, and the man is the domestic priest. And you can find a lot about that on the USCCB website. There's a whole thing about the tools for domestic church.
Okay, how about Mark take us to break?
Okay.
That was a great response. Thank you, Frank.
Yes, thank you. WNDZ 750 AM, Catholic Chicago, 312-255-8408. You can go to youtube.com/Catholic Chicago. We'll be back in a few minutes, continue our discussion on Catholic Men, Chicago, Southland, and their conference coming up April 15th. We'll be back. Please stay tuned.
Catholic Charities Blossoms of Hope Brunch will be held on Sunday, April 30th at Drury Lane in Oak Brook, in support of the Loving Outreach to Survivors of Suicide program, also known as LOSS. This inspiring brunch is an opportunity for all members of the LOSS community to gather with its founder, Father Charles Ruby, in support of the program and to celebrate the resilience that can be attained over time. For more than 40 years, LOSS has been compassionately accompanying individuals and families on their journey through grief. The program has been recognized by the United Nations as a model for helping those grieving this tragic event in their lives. In-person and online resources help people around the country find healing and joy in life again. To learn more about LOSS and the Blossoms of Hope Brunch, visit CatholicCharities.net.
Year 44 for me teaching. When I started here, there were teachers here that had taught me when I was a student. Now I'm the old person. Right now, I teach junior high math. I love when kids find what I'm teaching to be fun and they get it. I see that light bulb go off and it's a thrill. People are always amazed. What? You're here for 44 years? It's hard for me to believe, frankly. I love what I do. Every summer I think, oh, I miss the classroom. Even on the weekends, I think I can't wait to get back on Monday and teach those quadratic equations.
Shape the next generation of leaders. Teach. Apply today at archchicago.org/schooljobs.
Caring adults make all the difference in the lives of adolescents. Catholic Charities understands this, and our mentorship programs provide a free opportunity for young adults to spend time with volunteers who genuinely care about them. This program is ideal for youth aged 9 through 12 who may need support navigating the challenges of childhood and early adolescence. Our amazing volunteers serve as friends who help youth recognize their strengths and empower them to reach their full potential. Catholic Charities conducts a thorough background check on every volunteer, and our program coordinator closely monitors and supports every relationship. Mentoring is a fun after-school program that can help young adults build confidence and enjoy fun activities with their peers, too. To learn more, visit CatholicCharities.net or call 312-655-7970 in Cook County and 847-782-4224 in Lake County. We're connecting youth with great role models. Join us today.
We're back, WNDZ 750 AM, Catholic Chicago. 312-255-8408, and you go to youtube.com/Catholic Chicago. We're discussing the Catholic Men Chicago Southland special conference on April 15th with Bishop Joseph Perry and with Frank Casella. Father Greg, you have a question.
Yeah, before a question to Bishop Perry is what's the latest with Pope Francis and his health right now in the hospital? Have you heard anything from the latest Bishop Perry?
The latest I heard this morning is that he was admitted to, I guess, Gemelli Hospital, the big hospital in Rome, for some tests. I guess he had complained of some respiratory, I guess it's breathing difficulties or something, maybe something attached to the lungs or whatever, that they have to find out more relative to tests to see what it is. It doesn't seem to be very serious to me, but nevertheless, for a man of his age.
Right.
Now, he is, what, 86?
86, yeah.
86. It's amazing. So we certainly will keep Pope Francis in prayer. In fact, back on March 13th, he asked for 10 Hail Marys on that day for his 10th anniversary as a Holy Father. But now prayer for a full recovery. So maybe a question, first of all, to Bishop Perry, and that is, you know, Frank mentioned about on Saturday, April 15th, which we will talk about in a few minutes in terms of the actual day. But now with this whole Catholic Men Chicago Southland, do they meet weekly, monthly? Is it once a year? How does the whole process work? If I'm a member, how often would I get together with this group? How does that work?
There's several opportunities. The biggest is our annual Men's Forum event, of which April 15th is the description. What it is to bring men together from our various parishes who desire a deeper punctuation of their spiritual lives and trying to integrate everything that they do daily as husbands and fathers or single men and to give it meaning and purpose in light of the gospel of Jesus Christ. How do we live that out today, given the apparent confused messages out there, what it means to be a man, let alone a Christian man in the society of our time? To somehow work with that and to wrestle with that and to discuss with other men how they're doing it. And to receive some inspiration from a speaker such as myself or someone else who I think is worth emulating and how they do it. How do they walk with Jesus as brother and Savior and friend in their day-to-day lives? That's the kernel of it.
Okay, maybe before we get into the actual day, Frank, you've been part of this since the beginning from 2004. How has this group touched your life?
The best way to explain it is I feel I get more out of it than the other men do. The men come back and they say how much CMCS means to them. And they explain to me in the different ways and how, and it always touches me. And it's the void that I was looking to fill. You know, we all have a void in our heart, and You know what they say, you're either full of yourself or you're full of God. See, I have to be full of God.
That's a great answer.
Now, as we look at that day, first, maybe specifics too. Where is it? When is it? How do people connect to sign up for it? Can, parish groups come? All of that data, all that info that would be helpful for our listeners.
Sure. All the information is online at forum, forum.cmcsmen.net.
Okay, give
forum.cmcsmen.net.
one more time, Frank, for the web.
forum.cmcsmen.net.
Okay,
That
very
is
good.
that's the ticket page. What you show in there right now is our main website, and that's just cmcsmen.net. But if you click the red button, it'll take you where you need to go.
Now, what about a phone number? If anybody want to give a call, is there a phone number?
There is no phone number, but there is a contact button on that form you're showing right now. You click on that, you can contact us with the
Okay.
contact form.
And how much does a day cost, Frank?
Well, the tickets are affordable, and it only covers a food expense for hot breakfast and the mass and the discussion, thanks to our donors and Bishop Perry. But it's $20 for one man, $15 each for two or more men, $10 for deacons, and it's complimentary for seminarians and priests. And if you're in hardship financially, let us know, we'll help you out.
Which I think is amazing to even full price is $20 for a ticket, which is in today's age very, very minimal. How many attended last year?
We had about 50 to 60, but we were still at the back end of COVID.
Right.
In the past, we had over 100. We try to keep it around 100 because we have a forum format. It's not your usual conference format. We're going to sit down. We're locker room style. We've got tables and chairs and the podium and the crucifix. No tablecloths, no fancy banners, and it's all about the post-Lenten experience of returning to God.
Okay, the question is,
And
it begins
it's,
what time, and where is it at?
It begins, doors open at 8:30. The program starts at 9:30. We have discussion, and then the mass at noon, and we're done by 1 o'clock.
Okay, the thing is, and where's it located?
It's in Hazel Crest at St. John Neumann Parish, which is the North Campus, which used to be St. Anne's in Hazel Crest. We hold it there. We've had it there a few years now because guys like the access off the highway.
So it's in Hazel Crest, Saturday, April 15th. Doors open at 8:30. A program begins at 9:30. Mass with Bishop Perry at noon, and completed by 1 p.m.
What about our listeners that maybe aren't computer adept? How might they connect?
Go see a friend.
You can.
Call Father Greg.
Call me.
He'll sign you up.
You mean you're looking for a phone number? You're looking for an email address?
Probably both.
Maybe an
Either.
email address.
Yeah.
An email address would be mail@cmcsmen.net. Mail@cmcsmen.net.
Okay. That's a good start, and so it. I totally forgot. For like maybe 1 or 2 years, you did not have the gathering because of COVID, and so it was probably started again last year for the first time in 2022 to kind of rebuild to over 100 again. And let me ask you this question, Bishop Perry, where I asked Frank, how has this group touched his life in all your responsibilities and all your commitments and all that you do, all the masses, retreats, confirmations? How has this group touched your life over the years?
I think I find myself very inspired by men who are trying to live Christ in their lives. I see things happening in these men who are with us that probably goes beyond expectations. We're not used to seeing men holding a pair of rosary beads in their hands or holding a prayer book or asking some of the deeper questions about life. But I think the men feel comfortable with each other because there is a collection of them who are regulars, as opposed to, but anyone can come to our forum. Any Catholic man can come and benefit from that morning that's rich in inspiration, I think, and food, spiritual food for guys to take it out those doors and try to live better today than yesterday, and hopefully better than tomorrow, what it means to be a Christian Catholic man today.
Now, Bishop Perry, are you the keynote speaker?
This time around, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And what is your topic?
I don't have so much a topic as it is. I want to somehow wrestle with the men, the challenges and some of the confusions of the time within which we're living. We're living in a society that is becoming more and more secular, and guys are asking questions. Is it worth it? You know, where is God in all of this? Some of the strange ideologies that are floating out there in the air and so forth. What's real anymore? What is truth? I've been raised this way as a Catholic man. Why is suddenly all the wrong things right and the right things wrong, sort of thing? And guys are searching.
So a lot of confusion.
Exactly. How do we live our lives in and around that, in spite of it, despite it, whatever?
Mm-hmm.
You see.
And to Bishop's point, men need to talk. So we allow enough time for men to connect with each other on their spiritual journey and talk about that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I find very interesting is that you got on a key word. It's interesting how I've had a lot of men say women can sit and talk for hours and talk and in sometimes in a very deep, intimate way where we men tend to have buddies, bowling buddies, football buddies, TV buddies, drinking buddies. It's around an activity. But women can just sit and talk for hours and share deeply, where I think most men find it very difficult or uncomfortable to share profoundly on a deep level because they want to connect it to an activity.
Sure.
We're going to a Bears game, we're going to the Cubs game, we're going to the Sox game, around something where this is an opportunity on Saturday, April 15th, is to really speak heart to heart on a topic which you don't usually talk about at work or find very uncomfortable to find someone to talk with. Am I correct?
Sure.
And that's why, you know, being educated in the seminary, a lot of our friends have those discussions because we were trained to talk about them in very serious ways. I had a question, maybe a quick question, but we may be able to continue it the second half. Bishop Perry, what about your vocation journey? How did you know that you were called?
I don't know if I knew I was called. I mentioned to my mother when I was 9 that I wanted to be a priest.
What was her response?
She didn't say anything. Who listens to a 9-year-old kid?
She said, go play.
She was in the kitchen. I was in the dining room.
No, I've never heard that story.
Yeah.
She didn't say anything.
Yeah.
You kind of call. So which means out of the clear blue sky, you said, Mom, at the age of 9, maybe I want to be a priest.
Yeah.
She kept working in the kitchen.
At what point did she catch on?
Probably when I graduated from college seminary.
She finally caught on.
She knew I was serious.
Were you at, did you go to Quigley?
No, I was up in Wisconsin.
That's where you were, Wisconsin.
No.
That's where you're not,
No.
you weren't born. Now, you're not a Packer fan, are you?
No.
Oh, thank God. This program would have come to a quick end. And, well, in fact, we need to bring the first half to a close, so I want to thank in a very special way for the first half of the program. We're joined by Frank Casella, the Executive Director of the Catholic Men Chicago Southland. So, Frank, you'll be leaving us, and Bishop Perry will stay with us. So, Frank, you've done a fantastic job.
Yes, thank you.
Frank, you and I go back to the 80s, way back. We were in those days, we were young. You're still young.
Yeah.
I'm now 70, but you're still a young guy. So stay with us. You're listening to Catholic Chicago on WNDZ 750 AM, 312-255-8408. You can also get us on youtube.com/CatholicChicago. Father Greg Sakowicz along with Mark Teresi and Bishop Joe Perry will remain. And Frank, thanks for joining us. Stay with us and don't
Good
turn
to
that
see you
dial.
Catholic Charities' Family Self-Sufficiency Program has assisted thousands of single parents who are working to become more self-sufficient through education and employment opportunities. Our experienced case managers accompany participants for up to 5 years on their journey to identify, address, and break down barriers to improving their quality of life and achieving meaningful goals for themselves and for their families. Professional, compassionate assistance is offered in a safe and trusting environment as participants develop the skills needed to become financially stable and able to support themselves. Every achievement starts with a decision to try. To learn more about Catholic Charities Family Self-Sufficiency Program, call 847-782-4233 or visit CatholicCharities.net.
I am a seminarian.
The Church needs compassionate and well-trained priests to help guide each of us through life.
What inspires me, what draws me always to the priesthood is continue to see priests be a beacon of hope for other people.
You can play a part in the education of these young men as they prepare for a life of service to others.
I want to be that beacon of hope too, and it sets my heart on fire.
To support our seminarians, make your gift at archchicago.org/seminarian fund or call 312-534-7959.
Community is core to Catholic Charities' founding mission. For more than 100 years, we have met people and families where they are, serving anyone in need, regardless of their faith, gender, race, or ethnicity. As our world absorbs the economic, political, and social aftershocks of the pandemic, 50% or more of the 6 million people living in Cook and Lake counties have little or no savings. They are a paycheck away from zero. We are deeply grateful to everyone in the Catholic Charities community who partners with us to alleviate the suffering of the people we serve and offer them a better path forward. We are witnessing a message of mercy and hope to a world very much in need. Learn more at CatholicCharities.net.
Welcome back to Catholic Chicago here on WNDZ, 750 AM, 312-255-8408. You can also get us on YouTube.com/Catholic Chicago. Father Greg Sakowicz and co-host Mark Teresi. And the second half of the program, Evenings with Venerable Augustus Tolton, our community events hosted by Bishop Joseph Perry, where he discusses why the life, legacy, and spirituality of the first publicly recognized African-American Roman Catholic priest in the U.S. is relevant today. Here in studio to talk about the Venerable Augustus Tolton, back for part two, Bishop Joe Perry, Bishop of Vicariate 6 in the Archdiocese, elevated a bishop, consecrated in 1998. And I totally forgot that Bishop Perry was ordained in 1975 in the diocese or Archdiocese of Milwaukee, and then came to Chicago in 1998, so which means more than half your priesthood, well, the last 25 years as a bishop, has been here in Chicago. But also joining us on Zoom is Valerie Jennings. Are you with us? Good morning, Valerie. How are you?
Good morning. How are you?
Good to see you. Great to see you.
Good to see you also.
How come you're looking younger?
Oh, thank you.
If not right now, but in a little bit, we're going to watch a partial video about the life of Augustus Tolton. So maybe for just a moment, Bishop Perry, is a little background about Father Augustus Tolton that has led us to this present moment.
Well, Augustus Tolton was born into slavery in 1854. Both of his parents were owned separately by Catholic farmers in Missouri. And the whole backdrop of his life is really pretty much the Civil War, post-Civil War Reconstruction, and then moving into the whole legalized racial segregation atmosphere of our country at that time. When his mother's owner had died without a will, the man's wife had to sell off farm property and some of the slaves in order to pay off indebtedness.
Mm-hmm.
And when his mother witnessed that, she plotted an escape from the farm. This is about somewhere between June and September of 1863. When the
So he would have been 9 years old.
Yeah, he was 9 years old, and the Civil War was really up and running, and the numbers of people slaughtered in that war were just mounting. Well, she got somewhere near Hannibal, Missouri, and she was accosted by Confederate slave catchers. And then Union troops somehow descended upon the scene and reminded these bounty hunters that they were standing on Union soil. There was a Union camp just outside of Hannibal, Missouri at the time. So they took her to the shore of the Mississippi River and told her, well, ma'am, you have to take it from here because we can't go any further. There were people who escaped slavery and tried to get to the other side, which was Illinois, a free state at the time. Some of them survived, others did not. And they found this dilapidated rowboat on the shore that had an oar. Someone just abandoned it. So she put her 3 kids in the boat and began rowing. And the Confederates weren't satisfied with the situation, so they ran after her, and they were screaming epithets at her and shooting at her with their rifles. But somehow she made it across the treacherous currents of the Mississippi River and landed about 23 miles west of Quincy, Illinois. And trudging the rest of the way on foot, she settled in Quincy in an area that was a black section of Quincy, and that's where Tolton's story picks up.
Interesting. And now, Valerie, thank you for joining us on the program. And
Yes.
your involvement in the whole Augustus Tolton story, toward sainthood, what is your involvement with it?
Well, right now I am the interim executive director of the Tolton Spirituality Center. And the whole purpose of the center is a local parish initiative to establish for the benefit of all people, which would mean that it's a center that would include everyone, because Father Tolton experienced so much rejection and exclusivity during his lifetime that he was more about inclusion, especially after he had gone to Rome, and how he had experienced so much inclusiveness there. The center here in Chicago is going to be about the business of promoting that through efforts of vitality, evangelization, and hospitality. So we're a startup organization, so we're still trying to get our feet wet and we're going to get all the oars that we need, such as I shouldn't dare use that metaphor that Martha Jane rowed that boat across the great Mississippi. We're hoping to energize and enthuse the community in that way.
That's great. So Bishop Perry, so we have Mother Cabrini over at Holy Name, and her charisms that we want to connect with are the immigration, her work in immigration, health, and education. If we looked at Venerable Augustus Tolton, if you were to say, what are 3 areas of charisms that he had that we really should be emulating today?
He certainly was an emblem of tolerance in an era that was so much in turmoil over race in our country. The Civil War was fought over that as one of the supreme topics of that conflict between the North and the South, and where the energy at that time was spent in dividing people and breaking up people and owning people and all that stuff. I mean, he experienced a very positive part of the church at that time through certain individuals who tutored him some Notre Dame nuns, Franciscan friars, diocesan priests who tried to get him in a seminary. There was no seminary who would take a black boy in those days, so they tutored him, and the Franciscans maneuvered with their superiors in Rome to get him into a Roman seminary, because no seminary would take someone of my complexion in those days.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So he experienced a very positive ambiance in Rome and wanted to emulate that and what he experienced stateside with these priests and nuns who recognized his goodness and saw in him some spark that, could this young man be a priest, a first priest of African descent who could help his people who have been ravaged by slavery and are now freed and thrown out into society to be treated so haphazardly?
Now, he was born in 1854, ordained a priest in Rome in what year?
1886.
So he was 32 years old.
Exactly.
But he died young at what age?
43.
So he died 11 years after ordination.
Exactly. Yeah.
Amazing. Now, before we flip it back to Valerie, I know, Bishop Perry, you have done an incredible amount of research on the life of Augustus Tolton. I mean, hours and hours you've written, you've researched. Out of all the research you have done, and you've done a lot of digging, is there a particular item you found that has so fascinated you and touched your life? It might even be like even a little tidbit of history.
He died in Chicago on July 9th amidst one of Chicago's famous heat waves. We have heat indexes that are high. It was about 105 degrees for about 10 days straight, and a lot of people died in the city. Old wooden houses, a lot of people with no electricity, so there's nothing like air conditioning.
There's no air conditioning, of course not.
Anything like that. And he was getting off a train where our Meyer Center is today, from a priest's retreat, and he collapsed at 36th and Ellis. And they rushed him to Mercy Hospital, and they worked on him for about 8 hours or so. But then he succumbed and died of heat stroke. He asked his mother to make sure he was buried in Quincy, which was a signal that he had forgiven everything that had happened to him in Quincy that pushed him out of Quincy.
Interesting.
And people were very surprised at that. Why not be buried in Chicago? But he said no. And it was expensive to take a body, put it on a train, and take it down to Quincy, Illinois. Someone must have paid for it.
That's interesting. So he was buried back in Quincy, and as a way to really bring closure and forgiveness, all that happened.
His heart was still in Quincy.
In Quincy from a boy.
And there was a priest who made sure that he was kicked out of Quincy, a German priest.
A priest who made sure he got kicked out.
Exactly.
As a boy.
Michael Weiss.
Father Michael Weiss.
Yeah.
So his last act was forgiveness.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Yes.
Yeah. Mark, take us to break.
WNDZ, 750 AM, Catholic Chicago, 312-255-8408, or you go to youtube.com/Catholic Chicago. We're with Bishop Joe Perry, Valerie Jennings. We're going to continue our conversation on Venerable Augustus Tolton, and most especially, how does his life impact us today, and what are the challenges that he brings to us? We'll be back in a few minutes. Please stay tuned.
For more than 20 years, Catholic Charities Adult Protective Services has been advocating for seniors who are the victims of abuse, neglect, confinement, or financial exploitation. With our partners at local, city, and state agencies, our trained case managers follow through on every concern that is brought to our attention in a cooperative way to ensure that our seniors are safe and protected. According to the Illinois Department on Aging, last year nearly 21,000 cases of elder abuse were reported in Illinois. Of these, only 5% were reported by seniors themselves. So raising awareness is an important part of this issue. If you are concerned about a senior you know, call 800-252-8255 8966. That's 800-252-8966. With your help, we can stop elder abuse and look out for the seniors in our lives.
There's meant to really spread the touching story of Augustus Tolton, whom history dubs as the first priest of African descent to work in the United States. Born in 1854 as a slave, because his parents were slaves. And as you will see from the film clip that we're about to see, they worked a farm in the upper east corner of the state of Missouri, which by time of the Civil War was a slave-owning state. The economy of that state, as many other places in the South, ran on the economy of uncompensated labor of Africans, people who are originally from the African continent, our ancestors. And in the middle of the Civil War, things were really coming apart for this country. Frederick Douglass had lobbied Abraham Lincoln at that time, begging the president to admit black men to fight on the Union side of the war. Abraham Lincoln wasn't so convinced, so it took him a couple years to really finally admit Union troops to take in black troops. They were not allowed to carry rifles in the early period for most of the war. Many of them were laborers. They were chopping down trees and forests and cleaning latrines and taking care of the uniforms of the officers and so forth and so on. And as you know from Civil War history, at least the black side, there's some awful tragedies that took place, as well as some glories. Some of you might remember the famous film that starred Denzel Washington, Glory, which was the Massachusetts 54th Regiment that came out of Boston about 1863. And they are heralded throughout history as being a group of valiant men. And they made one of the earlier rushes at Fort Wagner, but most of them were slaughtered by the Confederates. And then they were all thrown in a ditch with their captain, who was a white gentleman by the name of Colonel Gould Shaw. That was one of the victories. There were other sad stories whereby the Confederates, coming upon or conquering a group of black soldiers, would just simply execute them on the spot. So there's both sides. Oftentimes when you see movies and documentaries of the Civil War, it's very romanticized, you notice. What was the famous movie with, the famous Civil War movie? I'm trying to think of it now. Gone with the Wind. Gone with the Wind, that featured a black woman who kind of belatedly received an Oscar for her.
And welcome back to Catholic Chicago on WNDZ, 750 AM, 312-255-8408. Also get us on youtube.com/CatholicChicago. Those who have been watching with us here on YouTube, Bishop Perry, what were we just viewing for a few minutes there?
That was our evening Tolton conversations. There's 5 of them scheduled. We've done 2 of them so far, whereas we look at a clip having to do with Tolton's life, or his impact, and then we have conversations about his virtues, the cause of his canonization, and the message that Tolton still seems to have for us. He worked here at 36th and Dearborn Street there at St. Monica's and made quite an impression here in Chicago for the short time that he was here, and really began the Black apostolate in this country, and it started here in Chicago.
Now, Valerie, a question for you. In the work you've done, research, prayer, how has the life of Augustus Tolton touched your life?
His courage, and the courage of his mother. I'm moved by the fact that he never gave up, no matter what. Just the fact that he wanted to become a priest, and having to leave his home in Quincy and travel all the way to Rome and spend all that time away from his family because of his drive and his love for the Lord, that has touched me probably more than anything, is that to be, courageous and to not ever run away from the things that challenge you.
Now, when did you
But
first
face
learn
them.
about Augustus Tolton? When you were a little girl? And the very fact that you heard about him, okay, when did you first learn about him?
I first learned about him when the cause for Tolton first came up back in 2010. That was the first time that I heard about Tolton.
Oh, so what you mean, you never heard of him when you were a little girl?
No.
So just 13 years ago, when you first learned
Yes.
about him. Okay, now,
Yes.
you learned about him, you heard about him, but what was it in the beginning beside the courage that has brought you to this point in almost immersing your life in his life right now, in the cause? How did that happen?
Well, when I first heard about it, it was just, I couldn't believe that the church had gone to all of this trouble to keep him out of the role of the priesthood. And so after finding out all of that information, I became much more interested in his life. As a result, it's been the path to sainthood. I can't see how the church cannot and will not make him a saint, because just the sheer fact that he had to overcome so many obstacles and so many people now that know his story, and how people have made prayers through him as a result. I just think that this is a man for our time.
Yes.
He is the man for what we are all still experiencing. One of the charisms that you asked Bishop Perry about a few moments ago, the charism of courage, sticks out to me more than anything.
He was ordained a priest in spite of the church.
Right.
In spite of.
Yeah.
I think
And
that
he kept going.
It was God's
kept
movement. That trumps the church, God's movement.
Yeah.
But I had a question, Bishop Perry. So Valerie's talking about not only his courage, but his mom's courage.
Yes.
I mean, maybe we should beatify both of them at one time. What is that? So our listeners understand, where are we in that process of moving Augustus Tolton towards sainthood?
Well, it took us 4.5 years to put together his dossier, which was sent over to Rome in September of 2014. You might remember we had a ceremony in St. James Chapel upstairs to close it off and package it and ribbon it and then dispatch it through the nunciature. And they took a couple years to study that with the officials for the Department of Causes for Saints, the Historical Commission, and the Theological Commission. And then it was taken to Pope Francis in March of 2019. And then in June, the Cardinal Prefect notified us that the Pope had declared him venerable on June 11th.
Now, what does that mean, declared venerable?
That means that Rome has accepted his story and declared that for the circumstances of his time, this particular Christian lived a life of heroic virtue.
Beautiful.
When others probably would not have amounted to that. And then we get into the whole miracle phase of finding a miracle or miracles that would get him named blessed and then named a saint. So we're well along in the process. It's gone much quicker than we had ever imagined.
Good.
And we found things in archives and libraries and those things, especially the Vatican archive, that we never knew existed.
Maybe a question for both Bishop Perry and for Valerie. Valerie, are you a cradle Catholic?
Yes.
And then growing up as a little girl, it amazes me. I mean, he is so revered, and the word is courageous. I can't believe you didn't hear about him until 2010, only 13 years ago. So all through grammar school, all through high school, all through the church, his name was never raised to you. And what about for Bishop Perry? When did you first hear the name Augustus Tolton? Back in grammar school, or were you older?
Seminarian.
Seminarian.
Yeah.
How did you hear about him? How did that transpire?
Well, whenever African American Catholics got together, especially clergy and seminarians, we always recite the names of those who went before us. Oh. So his name was out there, but it didn't register much with us, you know. But when you stop and think of it, some people can't quite imagine he was the first or why he is the first. Mm-hmm. People just presume that we always had black priests, but we never did.
Wow.
That's true.
No, we never did. It was hard getting into seminaries in this country. They wouldn't take us.
So we talk about
yeah.
So talk about Augustus Tolton. I love the word you use, Valerie. Courageous, would not quit, a fighter. Now, in the work they're doing right now, what are next steps with the work you're doing?
Well, the next steps is to continue to promote the areas of vitality, because we want to be able to incorporate some of the principles of Renew My Church. Mm-hmm. Because the things that we did in the discernment and decision process of Renew My Church parallel to what Father Tolton was all about. It was about making disciples. It was also about building the community and promoting and witnessing, our faith, and that we belong here too, just like everyone else. So that's really part of where we're headed towards, is to make sure that his story becomes very, very much alive and part of the story of not just Black Catholics in the Archdiocese of Chicago, but Catholics everywhere.
Exactly.
So until about the last 10 years, he was the best kept secret.
Yes, he was.
Just before Tolton died in 1896, there was that famous Supreme Court decision, Plessy versus Ferguson, which really solidified and cemented the laws that were creeping up in states, state legislatures, and lawless customs under the doctrine of separate but equal. Black people were to stay out of the space of whites. And that was our practice as a country until civil rights. That was the mood.
Wow.
That was the idea. So a lot of institutions went that way.
We need to bring it to a close.
Yeah,
We're running about
including the
15
church.
seconds. I want to thank in a very special way Bishop Joseph Perry for joining us for this full hour. Bishop Perry, thank you for your time and
You're
great
welcome.
sharing.
Thank you very much.
Special thanks also to Valerie Jennings. Great to see you, Valerie, again via the Zoom. So keep up your great work. Special thanks to co-host Mark Teresi, to our producer engineers, Clinton Cantrell and Michael May. God bless all of you. Continued Lenten blessings. And this weekend, Palm Sunday, the start of Holy Week, please get to church as much as you can. God bless.
Yeah. Thank you.
Goodbye. Thank you.
That was a great hour.
Join us every Monday through Friday at this time for Catholic Chicago. You can stream our programs live or listen to past programs by visiting our website, archchicago.org, and clicking on Radio TV. And please connect with Catholic Chicago on social media.